Hello, Psycho Fitness with Juma here, and welcome to this episode of the channel. Now, you've probably heard about different systems in our body, like the respiratory system, the digestive system, the reproductive system. So, our body functions based on the workability of these various systems that exist within it. Now, one of the systems in our body that also helps in various functions is what is known as the endocannabinoid system. You've not probably heard of that word, the endocannabinoid system, because it's not something that probably is taught in schools or in the university curriculums. But today I wanted us to at least look at it and understand what is the endocannabinoid system and why is it important to understand the functions and the interaction with various substances that we consume as much as or as far as the endocannabinoid system goes. Now, marijuana is one of the most psychoactive substances that is being abused in actually across the world today. And even recent statistics shows that in Kenya, marijuana is among the leading psychoactive substances that everyone across a majority of age group is using. Now, when we talk about the endocannabinoid system, this is the system within our body that marijuana interacts with when we smoke it. So in this episode, I just wanted to focus on how exactly does marijuana consumption or the compounds of marijuana interact with our bodies when we consume it. And that's why I was thinking it would have been a good idea to introduce the endocannabinoid system into this channel so that we can understand it. Now, that said, when the endocannabinoid system, I'll give maybe a brief meaning of what it is. It's basically a cell signaling system within our cells that coordinates various functions. And some of the functions of the endocannabinoid system are things to do with sleep regulation, mood regulation, appetite regulation. So it regulates quite a number of functions actually. We also have reproduction and fertility. We have various functions and we're just going to list them all down there for you to just go through, maybe read and understand what exactly the endocannabinoid system facilitates in our system or in our body. Now, endocannabinoid system, as I started mentioning earlier, just like other systems within us, the respiratory system, the digestive system, endocannabinoid system exists within our body. It is there naturally. Whether you consume marijuana or you don't consume marijuana, you still have the endocannabinoid system. It's just that when you do smoke weed or pot or whatever name you can call it, that is the system that the substance that you consume, the weed, interacts with, or the compounds of the weed interacts with the ECS. So for purposes of the presentation, I'll use the term ECS to refer to the endocannabinoid system. So endocannabinoid system, it has its components, and as I've said, it's just a neuromodulatory system that engages in various functions. Now, the endocannabinoid system consists of three components, and the first component of the endocannabinoid system are the endocannabinoids. So the term endocannabinoids means endogenous cannabinoids, means these are cannabinoids that are produced by the body itself naturally. We also have exogenous cannabinoids, which are plant-derived, or these are some cannabinoids that we have to consume for them, for us to ingest them in our system. And the endocannabinoids within the cannabinoid, the endocannabinoid system, are what helps regulate the various functions that we've said, functions of the ECS. So we do have two endocannabinoids within the ECS. And the first one is what we call the anandamide, or the AEA, and the other one is what we call the 2-AG. Now, these endocannabinoids just basically help, in regulating these functions, as you have said. The other component of the ECS is what we call the receptors. Now, receptors are like the binding sites. When you consume marijuana, the compounds of marijuana, they have to bind to certain sites within the ECS for them to activate, the properties that they do activate when we consume it. And the things that they bind with in the ECS are what we call the receptors. And there are two receptors in the ECS that helps in this binding. And we have the CB1 receptors, and also we have the CB2 receptors. Now, I want you to understand this clearly, because when we'll be talking about the consequences of marijuana consumption, these receptors will really come in handy and will really explain a lot based on, their localization, where they are located, and the effects that they produce when we consume marijuana. Now, CB1 receptors are more localized in the central nervous system, but there are also portions of the CB1 receptors that are present in the peripheral nervous system. So the central nervous system, as we all know, just consists of the brain and the spinal cord. Now, the other systems also, we refer to them as the peripheral nervous system. Now, when we smoke pot, there are compounds of pot that, binds themselves to the CB1 receptors, which are both in our brain, our spinal cord, and also our system as a whole. There are CB2 receptors, and CB2 receptors are mostly localized within this, the peripheral nervous system. So, for instance, the immune system, that is where we find a lot of CB2 receptors. And that will also make you understand when we smoke marijuana. How do we say that marijuana affects the lungs, or why do we say marijuana affects our reproductive organs or our sexual organs? And that will come in handy. The other component of the ECS are what we call enzymes. And there are two enzymes within the endocannabinoid system. I don't want you to forget one thing. Endocannabinoid system exists within our body, whether we consume marijuana or not. So whether you consume marijuana or you don't consume marijuana, you will still have anandamide. You will still have 2-AG, which are the endocannabinoids. When you move on to the receptors, you will still have CB1 and CB2 receptors in your system. They exist there naturally. Then when we move forward, we have now enzymes. And these enzymes, they just they destroy or they deactivate the endocannabinoids once they have performed their function. So this is the function. They break down these various endocannabinoids once they have done their functions, which we have stated earlier. Now, how does THC or how does marijuana interact with this system called the ECS? And this is what I wanted us to focus on. Now, first of all, to start, marijuana has two major ingredients. The first one being the delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, which is mostly referred to as the THC, and the second one being the cannabidiol, which is mostly referred to as the CBD. Now, THC mostly binds, when we consume marijuana, the main ingredient THC, which has more of the psychoactive properties, binds to the CB1 receptors. Remember, when I was talking about the receptors, I mentioned CB1 receptors are more localized in the brain and the spinal cord, the central nervous system. So THC, which is the psychoactive component of marijuana, it binds to these CB1 receptors in your brain, in your spinal cord, and also we did mention that CB1 receptors also exist in the peripheral nervous system. So that is the binding site for THC are the CB1 receptors. The binding site for CBD, the cannabidiol. The cannabidiol's properties presents more of the opposite of THC. So cannabidiol, as much as THC will make you feel high, it makes you feel aggressive and all that. Now, CBD does the opposite of that. It makes you feel low. It makes you feel calm. It makes you feel relaxed. It makes you feel meditative. People say, I'm going to meditate on weed. So I think the meditative component that people refer to when they're smoking weed is not the high, but it's the low. And that is the function of the cannabidiol, the CBD. But CBD binds to the CB2 receptors, which we said are more localized in the the peripheral nervous system, or especially the immune cells. And when you look at it in terms of localization, I said we needed to focus on the receptors because localization actually dictates function. So if we have more CB1 in our brain and THC binds to this CB1, then it means we are going to experience more effects of the THC in our brain than we're going to experience is probably in our reproductive system. And if we consume a lot of marijuana that is CBD or cannabidiol dominant, then we are going to experience more effects based on where the CB2 receptors, which binds to CBD, are localized or are located or found within our system. Now, probably the analgesic effect. Marijuana, THC has an analgesic effect, and it also has the psychoactive properties of it, which people have usually said, they are using marijuana to relieve pain, and I don't understand why people say that in Kenya when they don't even know which THC is which one. Yeah, they are different. You could tell by the appearance of the plant itself that this is CBD dominant or this is THC dominant. Those are functions that we look into in our future uploads. For the purposes of this session, I wanted you to understand. When we smoke weed, if it's THC dominant, it binds to the CB1 receptors, which are more found in our brain or our central nervous system. And so the psychoactive components of this particular substance is going to affect you based on where it binds more with your system. And the the ECS is existent in all of us. So you can't say that I can't be addicted to marijuana because I don't have this system. I've had people mention some of these irrational beliefs about marijuana consumption and all that. 2, marijuana or THC in itself, it elevates or it induces psychotic symptoms. And that is what I was saying, like we are not going to focus on the effects of this binding or this interaction between THC and the ECS because we have that for future uploads. Today, I just wanted you to understand. You have a system in your body that when you consume marijuana, it interacts with this system and produces either negative or positive effects on you. But now with that knowledge, when you keep watching these videos, you will be able to understand more. What happens when THC binds to CB1 in the brain? What happens, to my hormonal levels when I probably intoxicate myself with a particular amount of, weed or a particular type of weed? And why do they say that there is an existence of medical marijuana? Because I can assure you, in Kenya today, we don't have anything or any hospital that provides marijuana as a medical remedy. But everybody on the streets is talking about I'm using this plant because it's medicine. For marijuana to be used medically, based on the research and the studies that I've done on this specific plant, there has to be extraction. So if you're treating epilepsy or whatever it is, disease that your doctor is going to prescribe this medical marijuana for you, it has to be an extracted compound within the whole plant. They don't just go pluck the plant, dry it, and give it to you to smoke so that you can, treat whatever it is you're treating with it. Besides, there are other forms of treating, pain or whatever infections there are to be treated with marijuana. For pain, we have paracetamol in Kenya. We have ibuprofen. We have so many medications that you can consume to relieve your pain. We even have things that you can do that doesn't involve any medications to help you feel better. But consuming marijuana without understanding the psychoactive components of it or how it interacts with your system in itself is naive, irrational, and stupid. Sorry for using that term, but it's affecting a majority of people on the street because they don't understand. How does this thing interact with my body? Where does it go when I smoke it? Why do I feel a particular way when I use it? And why does it feel different sometimes when I use, how comes the marijuana that I bought from this peddler doesn't make me feel the same high as the one that I bought from my previous peddler? This is not about your peddler. It's about your system. It's about the component that you're smoking. And last but not least, there's a lot of lacing when it comes to marijuana, on the Kenyan streets. Marijuana is being mixed with so many substances that it's no longer marijuana, and it's no longer produces the effects that we're supposed to feel when we actually smoke marijuana. So we have jet fuel, we have alcohol, we have heroin, we have cocaine. There's a lot of other substances that are being mixed with this substance that we consume in the name of marijuana on the Kenyan streets that persons who consume it don't look into, and sometimes it's inadvertent. They are not aware that this thing is happening. So this is one of the reasons why we have increased numbers of psychotic tendencies among marijuana consuming population on the street. And I wanted you to understand that. Unless you have some marijuana planting farm in your house or at your home, then you can no longer tell what exactly you are consuming by going or walking down the streets and buying a roll of weed and then starting to smoke it, or maybe it's given to you at a party. So with all that said, I hope you have learned something about this system, and I hope you've learned that there's a system within us that interacts with weed when we smoke it, and partly some of it affects the brain more than the body, and you can never tell, because even you, whenever you buy this thing, you don't know what kind of marijuana. You don't know whether it's THC dominant, you don't know whether it's CBD dominant, and the rationalization around marijuana smoking, that we are doing it for medical purposes, is something that we need to get off our heads, because this is moving it out of context. We are taking the abuse out of context and making it look like we are actually using it. We are not using it, we are abusing it, and using it in a very wrong way. So with all that said, I just want you to hit the subscribe button. We still have a lot of information that we are going to put across as far as THC, CBD, marijuana, and any other drug there is concerned as far as this channel goes. So thank you for watching. Hit that subscribe button, click on the link, or the subscribe button is just down there, or you can also click on the notification bell so that you can always receive our notifications. For drug addiction treatment, you can always call the number below, and you will be assisted by the persons who are there trained in helping you overcome your various drug or substance addiction as far as mental health is concerned. Thank you.